Well, it's official. Red Hood sucks. And as a major Batman fan, I'm not gonna lie, it's hard to admit this. I mean, Red Hood has always been the stepchild of the Bat family. Honestly, if he didn't look so cool, I probably would have gave up on this character a long time ago. And I'm sure a lot of other people agree. And it really just sucks and it's sad to see that Red Hood just can't really get any consistently good storylines. Now, the reason this is all relevant news, because if you didn't know, Red Hood just got a new series that started a few days ago. um, Issue one just released for this new series, actually. But if you were interested in it or looking forward to it, well, forget about it because it was actually just canceled. So the reason I came up with this video is because I started to think about it like, wow, Red Hood doesn't really have any good storylines. The last thing I can think of was Red Hood and the Outlaws re-release because I just bought the omnibus for that a couple months ago. Now, I will say this has an interesting concept, but honestly, some boring execution as I read through it, and it didn't really hold my interest at all, really. Honestly, he hasn't had any good storylines since his origin, which was phenomenal, by the way. I mean, Batman Under the Red Hood is one of my favorite superhero movies of all time. But if it's not really dealing with that storyline or any previous stories with Jason Todd as Robin, then unfortunately, he really suffers from just bad storytelling and just overall just isn't a really good character. And his current run was actually written by Gretchen Martin. But like I said, it was canceled after the first issue due to some social media controversy, to say the least. But also, it had some really low sales and a bunch of negative reviews. And honestly, I read the first issue, and I have to say, it wasn't that bad. It was all pretty much set up. So, I mean, I can't really tell you that it was really good or bad, really. It was just a lot of, reintroducing Red Hood to this new status quo, kind of hinting towards some things that happened previously with, the whole Batman Hush 2 storyline. If you know, you know. But realistically, they're kind of just trying to introduce Red Hood into his own new story. Like I said, it wasn't that bad in my opinion, but a lot of people really did not like it. And I will say, it wasn't really interesting off bat. They didn't really bring up any new or interesting ideas. It was just pretty much them saying, you know what, let's take this character that's really popular. And for being honest, he hasn't really deserved that popularity. If he wasn't a Bat family member, then he'd probably be a really irrelevant character by now. But they said, let's take this character and let's make some money out of him. And they have some interesting things in there with a group or maybe a person called Tower that I guess is mind controlling people in this new city. And it's something I really did like seeing though, was I did like Red Hood teaming up with Huntress. But honestly though, I do think Red Hood works best when he's teaming up alongside another hero. Like I mentioned, the Red Hood and the Outlaw story. I really did like the idea of him teaming up with Starfire and Roy Harper throughout those issues and figure things out since they all have similar moralities and interesting backgrounds and how they form a bond. And like I said, his team up with Huntress I thought was pretty cool and could have been something really interesting. Huntress is a character I've actually loved for a really long time. And she doesn't really get that much spotlight, but she's been around for a really long time. And you constantly see her pop up in Batman related things. So it was really good to have her back. But one thing that I will say that I did not like at all about this series, and I know I'm not the only one, but the character's design sucks. Now, I think Red Hood, when he was first introduced, had one of the most interesting and iconic, honestly, superhero designs, character designs in comics, period. Now, when you first see him, it's pretty much a pretty simple design. It's just a red helmet with kind of like a biker jacket and, some black leather pants. And over time, we kind of seen that evolve with pretty much every comic book character. That's the case. You want to kind of add new tastes, make them look different. Of course, different art styles are also going to impact that. But the thing about Red Hood, though, it's been getting progressively worse. I mean, there was the whole infamous kind of like meme thing of his helmet having lips, which I think was more funny than it was bad. But things never got better from that point. It's to the point now, all yes, he's Red Hood. I mean, he wears a literal red hood and he has his black mask. But this design just honestly just doesn't feel iconic. It doesn't feel great. It just feels like, I don't know, filler. Now I can see if this is like maybe a design he had when he was first introduced. Maybe this could have been like a prototype design. And who knows? The series was canceled after the first issue. And even though we saw some promotional material for the upcoming issues that were planned out, at the same time, there's no really way of telling if he was actually going to get a new suit design or what was going to happen with that. I just have to say, it just doesn't look interesting. It doesn't let him stand apart or really kind of look like his own hero. I mean, honestly, if I wasn't a comic book fan myself and I didn't really know what the character design was going to be, if I was just a casual person that just randomly saw this new design for Red Hood, I probably wouldn't know who the heck this is. And that's really sad to say. And the fact that the story itself wasn't really doing it much service either, just really adds on to the fact of just how kind of trash this suit is and how infamous it's going to be down the line. So yes, the character design sucks, and the story wasn't really all that to begin with. But I think this character has just been written poorly his entire run, and he doesn't really have much growth. Every time we see Red Hood, of course, it's something dealing with Batman. I mean, it's kind of a given since he's a Batman family member, but it's always him trying to teeter on the line of being maybe an anti-hero or just a straight up villain. But it's kind of gotten to the point where it pretty much just depends on what they want to do, of course, with the story. It's gotten to the point they don't even know how to be consistent with this character. I can see if maybe every couple of years he kind of teetered a little bit more towards the edge, but it's not even that really. It just pretty much every storyline he's in is just completely different, and nothing really kind of adds together to who he is as a character. And I think Jason Todd is actually a really interesting character. Of course, he's the black sheep of the Robins. When you think of Robins, he's one of the more popular ones. It's crazy that he's that popular and he's honestly been robbing the least compared to everybody. But he is very popular. He was very successful. And of course, it also goes back to even back then, he wasn't really that popular now that I think about it, because he was voted to be killed off. So that's how he became Red Hood to begin with. He was voted to be killed off in the past. Of course, him being killed by Joker was one of the greatest moments in all the comics and is really iconic within itself and really kind of shake the comic book industry when it happened. And then him returning years later as Red Hood was really interesting. I mean, it used to be kind of a thing that nobody really stays dead in comics except for Jason Todd and Bucky Barnes and Gwen Stacy. And now that we're in 2025, all those people are back. I think the only person who stayed dead the entire time is Uncle Ben, and I wouldn't be surprised in 5 years we see him pop up as a villain too. But Red Hood is really, I feel like this character, even though he sucks, and I can't think of anything within the last decade that has made him worth being a good character. I mean, even his last time we saw him outside of comics was in what, Gotham Knights, the video game. And he's not the detriment to that game. That game would just fail to begin with based off of everything around it. But it doesn't help the fact that that game also sucked. So nothing about this character has really had any type of good redemption. The best thing I could think of, honestly, is maybe Batman Arkham Knight. And when you think about it, that's pretty much just a reiteration of the Under the Red Hood storyline anyway, just in a video game setting. So everything about this character sucks except for his origin, is what it pretty much seems like. But I do think there is some light at the end of the tunnel. I mean, all it takes really is just one good adaptation or storyline to redeem him. And that can be either in another comic, maybe in a couple of years, or even a few months. We might just see him pop up here or there. I know he's supposed to be part of the new DCKO storyline. That's going to be really interesting, and I can't wait to check out. But maybe he'll get some redemption there. Maybe you get redemption elsewhere. I think something that could really help this character, honestly, it's going to be a feature film. Now, I know there's been kind of rumblings about him teaming up with Nightwing in a dynamic duo animated film. And if that ever comes to fruition in the DCU, I think that is exactly what he needs to finally put him back into some type of good graces with comic book fans. I won't say the spotlight, because even with all the bad things that we've had with story wise involving this character, he's always remained popular. He has a really strong fan base. And I think a lot of that has to do with him having a great origin story, like I mentioned, a cool ass design when it's not, anything new or trash that they've been putting out lately. And it's the fact that Batman is arguably the most popular comic book character of all time. So if you're going to be constantly involved in Batman storylines, it's kind of a no brainer that you're at least going to be relevant for a really long time. So I think all of those things kind of play into the fact that he's still popular. But at the end of the day, if they don't figure out something with this character, he can be popular but still be boring as hell. And that's kind of where he is right now. So that's my opinion on this whole Red Hood fiasco. It is kind of crazy that his series was already canceled this early on. Like I said, the reviews weren't good, the sales weren't good, and it doesn't help that the creators behind it were also involved in some major controversy. So you tie all that together, it seems like Red Hood's biggest enemy isn't Joker, it isn't Ra's al Ghul, it's DC writers. This is comics, so anything is possible. So comment down below. Are you a Red Hood fan? If so, I feel sorry for you. But what do you think the future holds for this character? Other than that, though, again, it's Keith here, giving my thoughts on everything about comics. And thanks for watching.